Hello, and welcome to this remote session on how KnowledgePoint supports remote learning. I'm Richard Vickery, I'm Chief Technology Officer here at KnowledgePoint. Now, when it comes to delivering remote learning, there are three key elements that we need to consider. There's a webinar or meeting tool with which we will run our session and interact with our students. There are the student materials. Currently, we probably deliver these in a classroom setting, and now we're considering how do we best support the student with materials when they're remote learning. And finally, a communication tool to allow us to communicate with the students ahead of the session, to help them to understand what's going to happen, and perhaps to follow up with them after the session has taken place. So let's start with the webinar or meeting tool. There are some key features that you want to consider when selecting your webinar or meeting tool. You may already use a meeting tool as a business, perhaps for communicating with colleagues, and it could be that this tool can be adapted to be used to deliver remote learning. But let's look at the things that you would want to consider before taking that step. First and foremost, you want your tool to have some kind of webinar mode that allows you to control user interaction. For instance, you might want to mute all participants for the entirety of the session or have the control to unmute people's microphones selectively. You need to think about the capacity for your meeting. How many students might you be teaching at one time? Depending on the nature of your session, if it's going to be interactive, you might want to keep that number of participants quite low, which will probably fall within the threshold of most tools out there. However, if you wanted to convert your learning to much more of a webinar broadcast, a seminar style, then actually you might be able to have a large number of participants in attendance. And therefore, you will want to pay attention to the constraints that any tool has in that regard. Similarly, you want to consider the length of the session. Are there any constraints on how long a session can run for concurrently? Ideally, you want to be able to run the one session throughout the entirety of the learning experience. And finally, you want to consider how many presenters you can have. Is it just going to be one instructor delivering the training to all of the students, or might you want other people to collaborate and deliver that learning too? Giving some consideration to that would also be helpful. Thirdly, you want to think about the audio and video requirements you're going to have. Are you going to have your instructors presenting over webcam, or are they just going to be talking over a slide deck, much like I am here? Next, you're going to want to be able to share or broadcast some media, whether that's a slide deck presentation or actually sharing your screen so that you can perhaps show the use of some software or share other imagery or things from websites. Also, if you're going to want to play videos, then make sure there's support for that within the tool that you choose to. You want something that's going to be able to play that video in real time, and there are certain tools that do that better than others. Final thing here that you would want to consider in selecting your tool is how users might want to interact. Do you want to have a chat tool? Do you want to have it that people can put pointers and ink up the screen? You can have whiteboarding so that you can draw out diagrams, the users can draw out diagrams. And another area not on the slide that you might want to consider is breakout rooms where users can collaborate together and then share back with the rest of the class. So here at KnowledgePoint, we don't actually have an affiliation with any particular webinar or meeting tool, but on screen here are some of the tools that we know are successfully used by our customers, and indeed that we have used ourselves. In no particular order, there's Zoom, Adobe Connect, GoToTraining or GoToWebinar, WebEx from Cisco, Microsoft Teams, and some people even using YouTube Live. So moving on from the choice of tool, let's talk about student materials. How can you retain that strong engagement with the materials that you're perhaps used to in the classroom when your students are now remote from you and are at home? And how best can you distribute those materials to the students? Well, there are a few options. You could send out some PDFs. These aren't that easy for students to annotate, although some PDF tools do allow people to make markup onto those documents, but then they're not particularly portable. They're on the device that the student made those notes on, and they remain there unless they themselves come up with some way of sharing the files. You also may have some intellectual property concerns about sharing out PDFs, as they can very easily be distributed. A couple of options that KnowledgePoint can really help you with is we can deliver print to home in order to keep courses running at this time. There's a small administrative overhead there. You're going to need to place a few more orders, but shortly I can talk you through how to use our order tool to quickly place multiple orders for the same material to go to the different student addresses. And finally, you may have seen this before, or it could be new to you, is our My Livebook tool. My Livebook is a digital tool, allows you to deliver secure, annotatable materials electronically via web or on Android and iOS. So taking a look at delivering print to home, this is potentially the simplest thing for you. You already have printed materials ready. You normally use these in the classroom, and for now, sending that to the student straight at home may be the best and most convenient option. So here's just a quick summary of how you would get that material sent to various students' home addresses. Normally you would place an order maybe for 10 copies for 10 students who are coming to a classroom. Instead, order your first single set of materials as normal for delivery to the first student. Complete that order. When you go back to your home screen in your order history, you'll see the order that you've just placed. If you click on the reorder button that I've got circled there, you can then proceed straight through to the checkout. Don't need to change anything in your basket. Go straight through to the address screen and add a new address. Using our address lookup feature, you can then quickly type in the postcode and pick the delivery address for the student. Just double check the date required is appropriate. Enter any purchase order information that you do need to do. Pick the shipping option that you need. Click next, and having reviewed your order, confirm. And just repeat that for each of the addresses. It may take 30 seconds or so per delivery, but it shouldn't take too long, and quite quickly those orders will be in our system and we can print and deliver them straight to the point of need. The next way that you might want to get materials to your students is by using our My Livebook tool. It's an electronic tool for delivering electronic courseware to students on the web, iOS and Android. Your content can be converted easily into an ebook format with no additional e-authoring time from yourself, and the book is displayed with a table of contents, and the student can annotate using highlighting, comments, typing notes straight into the book, and inserting pictures, doodles, etc. from notepads straight from their mobile phone or computer. So as I've already said, the material can be accessed from anywhere with an internet connection on Windows, Mac, iOS and Android. And with iOS and Android, they have the option of downloading the material into a secure location only accessible by the My Livebook app, and they can then use that content offline, with any work that they do in the book being synchronized back to their account when they next go online. As I just mentioned, users can annotate their own personal copy of the materials. That's their notes and their takings from the learning for them to then review and to use at a future date. All the annotations sync across their devices, so notes taken at home will be available when they do return to work. And users will retain 12 months access to these materials. If you're wondering how to get started with My Livebook, if you are an existing customer of ours, then we can convert your printed materials into electronic format with no e-authoring required by you. You don't need to break down the content into modules, you don't need to reorganize the points or anything like that. The PDF documents that we use to print can be converted into an ebook format to be used by your students. You just need to let our team know the courses that you would like converted, and we can set about doing that for you. We'll create a new kit that you can then order from our web order tool, which will be the version of your content for My Livebook, and we can have that set up within about 48 hours. You would then place an order for the materials for the whole class, so 10 copies of the material, and we'll email you back a list of access codes for the material, which you can then distribute to your students along with the details of your web meeting. And that brings us on nicely to a communication tool, a mechanism for you to get the message to your students. Now, you may already have something in place in-house that you can already use. Whether you have something or you have a thought that there's something suitable, here are some things that you might want to consider when picking a communications tool. You more than likely want to be able to create branded templates so that you can communicate with your students. It makes a more trusted communication, and of course, present your brand, present your company to the student. A very important thing if you're setting up a new communication tool is to ensure that you authenticate the tool to send as your company's email address. So if I was selecting a tool, I want to be able to send emails as at knowledgepoint.com, for instance, and ensure a high delivery rate. It's a slightly technical process, but it's just something to bear in mind and maybe speak to your IT department about achieving that. You're going to want to be able to import data and update existing records within the tool too. You're going to want to put against the student record details of the course they're taking, the web delivery sign-on details, and if you're using My Livebook, the My Livebook access codes. You would prepare that data in a spreadsheet, perhaps against the student email addresses, and import it into the communications tool, and that would either update existing records within the tool or create new records if that was an unknown contact, such that you can then build a personalized communication that would greet the student by name, refer to the course they're attending, give them sign-in instructions for My Livebook along with their access code, and deliver join instructions for the online sessions. You can also prepare this as a series of emails to be sent out, one in advance of the course, one on the day of the course, and then you could even include some post-training follow-up, maybe inviting them to complete an evaluation, a survey after the event, as you might see fit. So everything we've looked at so far can be achieved manually. You can sit in front of your computer, you can book your webinar session, you can order your print or your My Livebook codes, and you can input that into the comms tool or import that into the comms tool to send out to your students. Of course, over a period of time, you're not going to want to keep doing that, and that's where system integration comes in. Web systems use something called API, Application Programming Interface, to talk to each other. And so you'll be pleased to know that there are ways of joining up these various solutions that we've been talking about in order to automate the process. And the way that works is your web booking system or your student record system would take orders for classes, and once that class is booked, it could push the order across to KnowledgePoint, either for us to print the orders or to request the codes for My Livebook. In the instance of My Livebook, the access codes would be sent straight back to that system, such that you can then send out a mail shot via your communication tool, including that information. Similarly, the webinar delivery platform, many of these have APIs too. So when you're creating your class in your student record system or your training administration system, you can automatically have the web URLs created, the virtual classroom created with all of the links that the students will need to receive. And so actually by just creating a class in your student booking system and by the orders coming in perhaps over the web or by your admin team, the My Livebook side or the print side and the webinar class can all be readied automatically. And then when the timing is right, an email can go out to the students telling them how they're going to join the classroom, how they're going to get their materials on My Livebook, or advising them that the print is on its way. So that's just a little flavour of what API can do. If that's something that's of interest, then KnowledgePoint has lots of experience in connecting such systems, and we'd be happy to talk to you about that. So I hope that was of interest. If it was to you, if it was relevant to you, then indeed contact your account manager or drop us an email at info@knowledgepoint.com, and we'd be happy to help and to talk about how KnowledgePoint can support you in delivering remote learning. Thank you.